I'm not sure, I'm talking about the guardians and the guides. I'm not sure if do you mean that it is an influence that is both conscious and unconscious to the person?
Yes.
Both conscious and unconscious?
Yes, well
okay.
let me describe how they assist. If we, as a person on earth, have the ability of, that we acknowledge within ourselves, we have the ability of, say, mediumship or communication with the spirit world, then our guides, whoever our guide is, will be able to communicate more directly with us things that they wish to communicate. But they communicate using a number of methods. The strongest form of communication that we actually have is actually non-verbal, non-language. The strongest method of communication that we have, even on the planet, is always to do with our feelings, our emotions. So you can tell who's angry even if they're of a different language, yes? Someone's raving on it, like we were in Greece and, and there were some riots there while we were there. Anybody who's angry like that, you can tell they're very angry. You don't have to know what they're saying. You can just feel the emotion coming from them, and through their actions, they are demonstrating this. So one of the strongest forms of communications that our spirit friends use are to do with feelings and emotions. That's one of the forms of communication. And of course the feeling of love is an emotion, and that is one of the greatest feelings they have for us, is the feeling of love. They also, if we can hear them, have the ability to communicate with language, just like we do. So they can communicate with us via language. They can whisper in our ear. And the way they do that is they actually drop thoughts into our brain that come from outside of our own construct, that come from outside of our own reasoning. And most of us have this happening almost moment by moment during the day without us realising it. These are the kind of thoughts that all of a sudden you'd be driving along the car, let's say, and all of a sudden you say, I need to go and see such and such. Right? And where did that thought come from? Well, sometimes it comes from your own desire, but a lot of times it comes from a reminder from your guide that there's something that they feel that you'd benefit from this interaction with so-and-so or such and such person, that they would feel would help you become more loving or help you expose some unloving behaviour. And they will often do this, where all of a sudden you feel motivated to go in a completely different direction that you were headed in. And that is emotional, but it's also language, in that they can communicate with our mind through the thought process and drop thoughts into our mind and make suggestions. Now, of course, because they're our guardians and our guides, their thoughts and suggestions are always loving in their nature. Right? Now, other spirits can drop thoughts as well, but many of their thoughts will be unloving in their nature.
Yeah. Yep. I thought it in relation to the free will, because I thought that a person that chooses to do evil or to harm other people, I'm not sure if this person will have ears to hear or hearts to receive the influence from the guardians and the guides.
You're dead right. And so what often these guides and guardians try to do, if a person's in a darker or more evil condition, they try to influence other people around the person to give them some kind of feedback about their condition and to assist them using those methods. Yep. So there might be something like, for example, the man who's a murderer gets placed in jail and he might be drawn to read a certain book. And in reading that book, he realises what he's done and comes to recognise some things, and therefore grows and changes. And often it's the guide or guardian who's influenced that entire process to draw them into a higher state of love. So the guide or guardian has a lot of potential ways of being able to assist a person on earth besides a direct communication with the person themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's a very powerful form of assistance, actually, because there are times when other people around us are more in tune with them than we ourselves are. And so then they have the ability, through this act of love, they have the ability. And as long as the person who they're communicating with is open and is exercising their free will to be open to that communication, then the guide is able, with the constraint of the law, to place the thought into the mind of the person. Yeah. So it just depends on the openness of the person. The guide also has so there's emotions, which are sort of, you can think of as non-verbal communication to the guide's charge, or language, which are like thoughts being dropped into the mind of the charge. But they also have the ability at times to actually speak words based on our openness, where we actually hear them in our ears, right? And some people have noticed this in particular when, their life is under threat, and all of a sudden they hear a voice to get out of here, and they get out of there and something goes past them and they just missed an accident, for example. And this is at times, based on the emotions that cause us to be open ourselves, our guides have the ability to actually say something to us that we actually audibly hear through our ear. There has also been times, historically, when guides in particular have appeared to people. Appearances. When they appear, they are under certain constraints, but they often appear to people in order to guide them through very, very dark times. And I would say pretty much almost everybody here in this room has actually met a spirit without knowing. You've just thought them to be a person who's materialised. They have a body, they've materialised a physical form that looks like the same as our body, and their particular role was to just help you get back on track with something, with an emotion or a feeling that you have generally. So they can actually appear to people. Oftentimes, though, it's completely without the person being aware, and therefore influence the person through a dialogue in an appeared state, in a physical state. So the guides have been given lots of scope to actually assist us through these processes. And the problem we have on Earth is that we often don't believe what's happening, or we often have different emotional impediments to accepting the different forms of guidance. And so sometimes you'll be driving along and a thought gets dropped in your mind and you just say, you've heard about that, and you just keep going, And that is now using your will, right, against what the guide has just given you. And the guide just goes, no worries, there'd be another opportunity maybe to drop something in the mind a bit later on and so forth. Yeah.
I was told recently that in my healing work I was channeling information. How do I know where that's coming from, and which is, the loving information, particularly for other people? I don't want to obviously give people unloving information.
Of course. Now, almost every person that does healing work, even doctors who are in hospitals, are being heavily guided by spirits who are helping them make these choices and decisions. This is how sometimes doctors, they have literally sometimes hundreds of different possibilities for a certain ailment to be one type of thing, and yet they have a habit very frequently of discovering exactly the right thing that the problem is. And that is often because they are actually guided. Many people who are doing spiritual healing work are the same. They feel that they are very guided and often being guided. Now, sometimes the spirits around the healer can be not their guides or their guardians or the guides of the person they're attempting to heal, but rather darker spirits. And so we need to have the ability to determine the difference. Now, a lot of that depends on our addictions, and this is where we need to really be conscious of our addictions. You see, if I have an addiction, so somebody's laying on a table that I'm trying to assist, and it's a male, and I have addiction to try to get the male's approval, right? But I also have an addiction at the same time that big men shouldn't ever cry, right? At the same time I'm feeling that a man shouldn't cry. I'll be trying to do some healing work. The healing motion is grief, but I, through my emotions, are projecting at him at the same time, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. So I'm trying to help him heal, but at the same time, resisting the process. Now, spirits can also help me in that addiction. So if I'm having the feeling there's a big man here, I don't want to see him cry, or even if I'm a healer, often there's a big man here, I don't want to see him get angry, then you'll have spirits with you who are trying to suppress his anger. Right? And they're not your guides or your guardian, they're somebody else. They're trying to shut the man down. They're not trying to help him, they're trying to harm him actually. If he has anger in him, he needs to actually connect with some of it in an appropriate manner. And on the table is a great time, like for him to connect to some of that. And but if I've got coming out of me, I'm scared of his potential for rage, and then I've got a heap of spirits with me going, no, you don't want to see this man get angry. And my intention and the spirit's intention with me are no longer loving, and it wouldn't be my guides or his guides who are involved in that process. It'll be somebody else, a darker spirit.
It's interesting because we often do a prayer at the beginning of anything and say just bypass all my stuff and just make this a loving, thing. I don't know if that works. I mean, I sincerely mean that often because I'm aware that I have my own, stuff there. So.
Well, your guides will attempt to bypass your stuff as much as they're able. However, the key is as much as they're able. You see, we've got to understand that it's impossible to bypass a person's true condition. And then we might be able to temporarily do so for a short period of time, but in the long run, a person's true condition will be exposed. So if I am a healer and I'm trying to heal people, and every day I pray, I realise I've got stuff and I don't want to influence a person, and then during that day I don't deal with any of my stuff, and the next day I pray, I realise I've got stuff, I don't want to harm the person, and during the day I don't deal with any of my stuff, and then the next day it's the same, and the next day it's the same, and so forth, then am I really intending to deal with the stuff that I've got? Aren't I really just intending now to skip over it all every day, hoping that my guides will also skip over it? You see, this is where it gets down to pure intention again. So it's refined to have a pure intention to not harm the person because you know that you have different emotional feelings that are unloving, and it's great to ask God to for the protection and help your guides to protect the person from those unloving experiences. But for you to do that every day for 25 years without actually addressing any of those unloving things within yourself, that's not sincere.
No, well, I'm not doing my healing work at the moment on purpose.
No, I'm just pointing out some...
No, but I'm saying that I'm listening, since I've been listening to you, I've been thinking about what is my healing work, and
what do you desire to do?
What's my, I don't mean, at the moment I'm in the space of not knowing what my next thing is to do anyway, so that's okay.
So the only thing I would say is that if I am sincere about my errors, I won't pray every day for somebody to skip over my errors. No. If I'm sincere about them, I'll be praying, in fact, today I want to deal with some of these errors. Right? That's what I'd be actually longing for. So that's one of the things the guides will help you do as the healer, the person who's healing. The guides will help you work through your errors, but they won't help you avoid your errors for good. So that they might help you in one particular healing or a few healings with people to skip over certain things, but in the sense that for the person's benefit, but they're not going to want to do that for very long if they are sincere guides, which all of them generally are. And even if they're guides that are not on the divine love path, they're guides that are on the natural love path, they won't want to help you do that ad infinitum because they realise that your own feelings are an impediment to the healing. And of course, what they're interested in doing is healing the person. So for that reason, they won't do that. Yeah. Now, it's already 8 o'clock, and we've got to finish at 8:30. So I'll have to break this discussion into the next discussion because there's more to cover here. But what I would like to do is just, firstly, do you understand, all of you, how your guardians and your guides communicate with you? Yes? And one of the things that came up when we were in Greece was our guides channeled to Mary a list of things that can help you have a stronger connection with your guide, practical things that can help you have a stronger connection with your guardians and your guides. And perhaps it's a good time to mention some of those things, isn't it? You've still got the book with you. I just remembered the first